Thank you, Tom. I'm going to go through the 4 questions you've raised, which I think Marilyn has also addressed. I just want to say, by way of sort of our umbrella, this is an important set of questions, not just for the United States, but for the rest of the world. Quite simply because there is no other country in the world that is able to provide the sort of leadership that will give us a values, rules-based system internationally. And I think the reason there's been so much unhappiness about what has happened over the past few years is because the diminution of the place of the United States is something which causes unhappiness in many parts of the world. It's quite the converse, ironically, of the anti-Americanism that people think exists. It's a distinction that people draw between the country and between a particular government of the country. And I think we've seen in particular in many countries since the election, the presidential election last week, a strong sense that people are very ready to cut slack, to re-engage with the United States and to allow the United States to resume the place that it has played so well, I think, in the period after the Second World War. The system of rules that was put in place after the Second World War is largely a system of rules that reflects the values of the United States, and it is a system of rules that has served the United States well. Without those rules, the United States would not be where it is today, whether it is the humanitarian rules reflected in Geneva, or the trade rules reflected now in the WTO, or the intellectual property rules, or the foreign investment protection rules. Those rules have all contributed, and my bet is that 20 years from now, the United States will have re-engaged very, very firmly, if only because it will have recognized that it needs a rules-based system to ensure that the new powers that are plainly emerging, the Chinas of the world, the Indias of the world, the Brazils of the world, play within a level playing field. Now, to your question, have the changes to our practices been necessary and effective? Let me just focus about what I know about the one story that I wrote in my book. The answer is that they were not necessary and they were not effective. How do I know that? The administration on the 22nd of June 2004 told a story about all the wonderful stuff that had been gotten out of Mohammed al-Qahtani. I went off and tracked down the head of al-Qahtani's exploitation team. I write about him in my book. I have a whole chapter about it. Basically, he told me they got nothing out of him. Basically, he explained to me, as many interrogators did, that there is an important distinction to be drawn between the moment of capture, at which point it may be that harsher type of interrogations may produce something, although he was very careful to point out to me that he was not proposing those types of interrogations, and on the other hand, an interrogation practice that takes place a year after capture, which I think most interrogators I've spoken to tell me is completely useless. And I've heard the same thing, frankly, on the British intelligence side about the treatment of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. I am told that the material they got out of him is basically useless. It produced a lot of information, but no one knows what part of that information is accurate and reliable. And I discount basically everything I am told about what has been brought out of these methods of interrogation because of what al-Qahtani's head of exploitation team told me, and because of what the British intelligence folks that I know have told me about what they are told has come out of these interrogation techniques. 2, how do we rebuild our international standing? I don't think it's actually going to be that difficult. As I already said, I think that there is a strong desire for the United States to re-engage, and a re-engaged United States will be welcomed very warmly by many, many countries around the world. One of the great tragedies, I think, of September the 11th, and there were many, I was there on that day, I know many people who were directly involved and lost their lives. One of the great tragedies is that there was a moment after those terrible events when the world was ready to accommodate the United States and to fight with it in the struggle against the terror that it and my country undoubtedly faced, and that moment was squandered. It was a remarkable achievement of President Bush's administration to throw away, in a matter of weeks, the goodwill of the world. What does the United States need to do? Let me just identify 3 things. Firstly, it's been said before, The global war on terror, so-called, really is a misnomer. It's not only been misguided, it's been catastrophic. Why has it been catastrophic? The British came over on September the 12th and told the administration, don't elevate the status of the people we are struggling to contain. By calling it a global war on terror, you transform individuals from criminals into warriors. And by making them into warriors, you legitimate their struggle in the eyes of a great number of people. And I have testified on this now several times. Please, 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 everyone in this room, stop using the words global war on terror. Some of you will compare the English version of my book, Torture Team, with the American version of my book. The English version, everywhere those words global war on terror appear, are in parentheses. My American editor would not allow me to have those words in parentheses because she said, oh, they'll think you're some sort of Brit lefty who, is anti-American and is undermining the arguments. And, frankly, I struggled and I struggled and I struggled and I did not prevail in that particular context. But it is deeply damaging. Secondly, re-engage strongly in what no country has been better at doing. The rule of law and the dignity of every human person. That is what the United States is about. That's what I believe the United States is about. I don't need to repeat everything that has been said on how that is done. There are many ways forward for doing that. I think as soon as that is done, irrespective of the political direction, I don't think it's a left-right issue, a Republican-Democrat issue, and many of the people I describe in the book have rather different political views from my own, and I think they've achieved a certain heroic status. What it's basically about is values, who we are, why we do what we do, what inspires us, and the rest of the world, I think, is passionately ready to receive that message and to re-engage. And thirdly, I think across the board, very first thing the President needs to do on the first day is basically say no torture, no cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment under any circumstances. It is not who we are. And that can be done, I think, very easily, and it must go beyond, I think, what has already been done. I think there's no question this does not happen formally, certainly in the US military. It needs to be extended to the CIA and to all other actors.